G'day, g'day, wherever you are in this beautiful, wonderful, magnificent, and exhilarating multiverse of ours. This is Mastering Music, Mastering Life. I'm Tony Jack, the Bear Mans, coming to you from my studio, Deluxe Mastering in Melbourne, Australia. And today I'm just absolutely delighted to have a chat with this gentleman who I've only, as in much of my life, late to a lot of parties, and I'm late to this gentleman's party. Had no idea of this guy's existence until recently, through our friend Rich Beck's Mix Fix Produce and Conquer Facebook community. But this gentleman who I'm about to have a chat with has worked with some up-and-coming acts you may have heard of, like 50 Cent, Dr. Dre, Eminem, Snoop Dogg. I think he's hung around with a dude called Jimmy Iovine. Some of you may have heard of him. Michael Jackson. Young, up-and-coming talent that we can keep our eyes and ears out for. But this gentleman is extraordinary. His career is extraordinary. He's a very humble man, and I'm so pleased that he's accepted my invitation to come and speak with me. So Steve B Braughman, is that how we pronounce it? Braughman?
It's actually Boff. It's kind of like cough.
Boffman. Okay.
Boffman. Yeah.
Is that no, that wouldn't be no, it's not German in that. Germanic? Is there some...
German, yeah. I think it's kind of a confusing last name. This is why I think a lot of people just call me Steve B.
Yeah. I get it.
Over the years, people just kind of dropped off the rest of the word. You're like, just Steve B. Easy enough.
Steve B. Yeah. I get it. Well, Steve, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you taking time out. So one thing we've got to clear up here. For anyone that does go onto your Wikipedia page, they're going to see that it mentions somewhere that you're, you're Grammy Award winning producer, an engineer, and a lawyer. And we've cleared up today that you're not a lawyer.
I am not. I would be the world's worst lawyer. You would not want to hire me as a lawyer. That's for sure.
That's that was.
I don't know who does these Wikipedia pages. Like they just magically appear sometimes, and I had nothing really, honestly, to do with that.
But at least it's good that someone cares enough about you, the fact that they'd even invested time to do one. So I don't think I've got one. So
yeah, I guess that was really nice of somebody to do that for me. So thank you.
but
I like that they elevated me to lawyer status, so maybe.
Is that an elevation though? Really?
Really, exactly.
I don't know. I mean, no disrespect to lawyers, but I guess we all.
I often when you need them, you need them. They're like a doctor, I guess. Well, if you need one, you want a good one.
You'd want a good one, and you want to make sure you've got heaps of coin to do it, because if you're going to go into battle, you better be certain, and you better be coined up. Seriously.
Yeah, well, like anything else in this life, if it's worth, if it's worth having, it's worth spending on. So. Yeah.
No doubt at all. All right, so Steve, you're quite a quiet achiever, my friend. I mean, look at all the things you've done, and yet you unlike other engineers and producers who've worked with the artists that you have, who seem to have a bigger profile. You seem to kind of just be in the shadows and just swimming about. So, are you a guy who's just Are you not much into PR, or are you just kind of happy in the fact that, hey, these people know who I am and I swim in these waters and the work is there? And because, you're a real quiet achiever in that respect.
Yeah, I've had a lucky career of being at the right place at the right time, and kind of relied more on a peer-to-peer recipe for my work, like how I get work is, mainly just I use this guy, and so I keep on getting referred. And so there was never really any reason for me to do any really, more branding and or hyping of myself, because the work was coming in, and work I got, I really enjoyed and still do enjoy. So yeah, I'm very lucky that way. I have an argument like I could be doing it better. I should maybe have my name on some plugins and or doing something maybe that be more proactive in that world. But I don't have a manager. I never really have. It's just me, so when it's just yourself, and then you're already busy with so much mixing and mastering and production work. you don't really have time to be on the social media and all the other stuff that it takes to really promote yourself and and do those things.
Well, I guess the $64,000 question that people are going to ask, and I get asked often as a mentor to young aspiring engineers and producers and studio owners, is how did you, whether it's me, or I guess the question will be asked of you now,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get from a young hopeful, because everyone started from nothing, yeah, and then you go the trajectory from there to being in the position that you are. So what was your journey and path to building your clientele and your peer group in your business from the get-go, from a young hopeful Steve B to today?
Right.
Take us through that.
I've always been a big proponent of you make kind of making your own destiny in the way of that. You got to put yourself, if you want to make music, you got to go where music's being made. So I made a conscious decision after college, after I graduated with a music degree, to go to a music city. I laid out the ones that were kind of available to me, Los Angeles, Nashville. At the time, New York was still very, music centric. The Bay Area in Northern California. But I landed in LA. And so, but I was very, and then I looked up at that point in time, all the major studios that were in Los Angeles, and I put resumes in, and I landed at Larrabee Studios in West LA, or West Hollywood, actually. That's really what started it off. And so the relationships I built through Larrabee West is, continued, to sustain me to this day. And that's, 25 years later, 25 plus years later.
What was it like at Larrabee when you, as a youngster, getting in there? How was your experience there, and what are the great things that you learned working out of that studio?
Yeah, I learned so much when I went there. I was a kid from Northern California who came from a majority white neighborhood and city. I had maybe 2 rap records to my name. I had, I think, NWA's first album, and I also had 2 Live Crew, The Nasty As You Want to Be. I think that was the extent of my hip hop collection at the time. So when I got to LA and I got to work with like people like Heavy D and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Nate Dogg and everyone.
How good was Nate Dogg?
Was that?
How good was Nate Dogg?
Oh, he was amazing.
He I reckon he was the most gangster of all the gangsters, man. He was the hardest motherfucker I think that walked on this planet.
He was a very close and personal friend of mine. When Nate, sadly, when his health deteriorated and he had strokes, I was kind of like the guy that would make sure he was doing all right. I'd go out to his house and clean up and make sure, his cats were fed and he wasn't being looked after, I felt, as well as he could have. So when time came, I was really blessed. His manager and family had me speak at the funeral, and it was a touching moment. It was a good goodbye, but just so soon. And I really loved the guy. He was one of the guys that I really I bonded with, and I probably worked with for at least 10 years.
Mm. Tell me, just on a tangent question, you mentioned 2 Live Crew, which as a youngster, I got, when your taste is, you're a bit more immature and that sort of stuff is a lot funnier. But is it true that Luke Skywalker became a pastor or something like that? Is something weird?
I believe so. I don't really know him at all. Yeah. I personally bought his album because I wasn't supposed to. As a kid.
Of course.
It was like it was banned, and so I'm like, of course I'm gonna buy it, and I had beautiful women on the cover, and I was like, oh. everything a teenage boy wants,
no doubt.
Bad words and beautiful women, and and I wasn't supposed to have it, and so I got that album. I think much, Straight Outta Compton was much the same way. The NWA's album. I think I wasn't also supposed to have it, and yet I wanted to know what they were saying and why they were saying it, and to later on be able to meet know Dre, and it was a cool full circle for me, from being a fan to being an engineer that worked underneath his his Aftermath crew.
Do you want to share the story that Rich shared this with him, but I think it's great if you'd share it here with us. The time when Dre walked into our room and everyone's working around him, and no one was talking to him. Their heads were down, and no one was talking.
Oh yeah, that was we were down in Florida working in this little studio, and we were working with Eminem at the time, and what was happening was Eminem's people would like to keep Eminem very sheltered, and so he was always brought in the back door and kind of woven through the catacombs of the studio until he finally made it to the control room where I was with him, and Dre would just walk through the front door, and at some point Eminem's people kind of like had a talk with the staff and said, look, if you see Eminem or you see Dre, just don't look at him, kind of just look away and kind of, scurry off. And nobody ever told Dre that's what was being said. And so at some point, Dre got in the room and he looked at us, the crew that he brought and the people he knew. He's like, is it just me, or everybody here like really unfriendly and trying like not to say hi? And and we were like, well, I think something was said, and they were told not to. So Dre's like, no, everybody join it, have everybody come in. Dre's like, I like people to say hi to me when I come to the studio. I like to wave. I like to say hello, and so it was kind of a fun, oh, okay, he's a person, and that's all these guys. Even Eminem is a person. Eminem likes to be said hi to, and and he's a great guy. And it wasn't that his people were being malicious in any way. It was just that, they were thinking they're keeping their artist in his headspace, and by not introducing too many other people into his world. When the reality is, when you're working in a small environment like a studio, you got to say hi to people. You got to,
yeah, no doubt.
You're going to walk down the hallway and see people,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing I found about celebrity is obviously I haven't been around as many as you have, and international stars, but at the end of the day, we forget that they are people, and I guess they probably, over time, they've evolved, or they have gatekeepers and an entourage, and so they probably live in a bubble themselves. So after a while, they probably react differently and live differently just in the day-to-day situation. So they adapt to that. But it's interesting how the layperson, how they can be so easily starstruck. And one great lesson I've learned, and I tell kids, is it's great to respect people and look up to people in terms of their achievements or their reputation, but never lose sight of the fact that they are people. And so don't put people up on a pedestal. Respect them by all means, but respect should be a default for everyone, regardless of your reputation or your discography or what have you. But nonetheless, it's easy to get very swept up in all of that. And so it's funny how I'm sure that people like Eminem and Dr. Dre and all the celebrities that you work with, deep down are just normal people like we. When you strip everything away, the titles, the gold records, the reputation, the record deals, all that, we're all pretty much the same, made of the same stuff, with the same feelings and insecurities and wants and needs, et cetera, et cetera. So,
oh, absolutely. I think the only person I slightly put on a pedestal, and the only person I've ever asked for a autograph, which I got it from my father, was Michael Jackson. And I had a Jackson 5 disc set, like 5 disc set. And Michael signed that for my dad. But just because he was, because I grew up through the Thriller era, I remember when Thriller came out, on TV, it was like a family event. We all sat around the TV. My dad, put it on, and it was like the whole neighborhood was like in my living room watching, this TV event. And so, to be able to work with Michael was one of those moments where I was definitely starstruck. And I think that's maybe the only time I was really truly starstruck. The rest of the time, they got to be people fairly quickly with me. All like, oh, well, these are people. Michael somehow never left that, my 9-year-old vision of where he was, who he was as a worldwide star.
So what was your experience like with him, just being around him? I mean, just in the day-to-day dealing with him?
Day-to-day, like, he was interesting because as an artist, as a musician, like I was really like just taken back by what a powerful voice he had. As a businessman, I got to hear him like on a few phone calls, and I was in the room with him while he was doing business, and he was a shrewd businessman. Like, and I was kind of surprised about some of the aspects here. You're kind of surprised, like even his tone of voice, like like slightly, huskied up a little bit when he was doing business, and so you're like, oh, usually high pitched, gentle Michael tone that you're used to. Otherwise, every time he would talk to you, it'd be a very kind of genuinely gentle and caring voice. And then socially, he was a tad bit like, I would hate to say stunted is the word, but it kind of feels that way. Like he kind of had the interactions of like a 13-year-old, like an awkward conversations, like, like out of nowhere, he'll just, you just be doing nothing, something. And then like out of nowhere once he's like, "Are you from Calabasas?" And I'm like, "No, why would you say that?" And he's like, "Oh, you sound like you're from Calabasas." I'm like, I hadn't said anything. I'm like, okay, no, that's not, like I couldn't figure out like where it was coming from or what was going on, but he was, he just kind of like, it's just kind of those, awkward 13-year-old kid type questions that would come at you.
Yeah.
I remember, tell you one more story. I'll make it quick, but
let's go. We got a little time. We got something different.
We were eating. It was time to order lunch. We all ordered our lunch, and there was a kitchen upstairs at Larrabee Studios, and the 2 studios were downstairs. So the food came. I told her, "Hey, the food's here." So, and this was maybe the first or second day I was working with him, and I get the food set up on the table upstairs, and me, the producer, and a couple other people that were part of the sessions, a couple programmers or whatever, we're all sitting down at the table, and I'm about to eat, and I look around, I'm like, "Wait a minute, where's Michael?" And he wasn't there. So I go back down to the studio, and I'm like, "Michael, the food's here." He's like, "Oh, you got food for me too?" I'm like, "Yeah, we ordered you food, man. Come on up." So he sits down with us, and he starts eating. He gets a phone call, and he takes it at the table, and it's one of his handlers, one of the people, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just down here having food with the guys." And he was like so excited, and I felt bad. I was like, man, has nobody asked this man to eat with them? I mean, like what's going on? It was a very strange moment of like, someone had to have asked him to eat before, right? Like, I'm
sure, but I think people that are employees or part of the staff are probably feeling like, again, it's that whole perception of like, this guy's out of my pay grade. I shouldn't be, I'm just going to put my head down, stick to, what I'm here to do, and I'm not going to get involved, or in case I say the wrong thing, or
Right, yeah. It was just caught me off. Like, it was a very interesting moment. It was just to see someone so excited just to be invited to be a part of, a thing that we all should be doing together,
Yeah, no doubt. But the guys like him don't have normal. There's nothing normal in their life, is it really? And you think about it
sadly, yeah. I think at some point, his life was a little bit taken away from him, and I think he sadly had that part of him was a little bit of a void, like knowing what real friendship is, and like knowing what just, general courtesy even sometimes, is, because everybody was either being paid to be courteous or, or some other version of whatever to be his friend, which was, I guess it's, it's kind of sad,
No, absolutely. I mean, the fact that he'd have, a rat as a mate, if you know what I mean, and have a song about him. It's sad. It is sad to think that you're living through life, and even though you're probably in tune to your intuition, there's still always this feeling of being suspicious of people's motives, you know?
Yeah. I'm lucky I'm not famous.
I would want to look. I think it's great to be known within your peer group, within your industry, as whether you're known as a pioneer or you're respected as someone who is a great contributor towards it. But in terms of just flat out fame on a global scale, like rock stars, no, I don't think I want it either. I can't imagine anything worse than not being able to do your simple things like going out. Although I think if you're in Ireland, I think Ireland's is different that way. Like you two who live in, I think it's Dublin, is it Belfast? They manage to walk around the streets and get coffee, and no one seems to hassle them. And I think that goes for other Irish artists as well.
I mean, I think some people are able to manage it. I think it's just, in the end, it's, I think when you're a child star and you're kind of brought up like Michael was, I think that's when you really start losing. I mean, I think if you're at a point where you're mature enough to be able to handle those things and understand what is going on and being able to navigate that world on your own without people telling you how to navigate it, that might be a different story, So I think, you two guys were all grown men when they were, when they became famous. And so I think they had a little edge on them.
Yeah. Yeah. So Larrabee Studios. Okay, let's go back to Larrabee. So about your lessons at Larrabee and who are the people that shaped you and mentored you during that time?
Man, I had so many great mentors through Larrabee. People like Tim Palmer was a great mentor there. Dave Way, who was an amazing pop and R&B mixer. Dave Pensato, who I assisted for a long time. And, there's Sylvia Massey, who was she was just so much fun to watch mix and so inventive, so out of the box thinking. Like, sometimes the things that she would come up with, I was like, oh, wow, I would have never thought of that. That's amazing. And so, she was a great influence. Neil Pogue, who was just another fantastic R&B, hip hop, pop mixer. Kevin Davis, one of my favorites. He's a good friend and just, fantastic mixer. So I had a lot of range too. It was a lot of I was working on Marilyn Manson projects, and hard rock projects, like Machine Head to all the death row and hip hop and R&B that was being done, throughout that time. So I was very lucky to be in a place that gave me such diversity of clients to work with, and then to learn from them, and that's kind of how I think every successful engineer does. They kind of like pick and choose the different things from the different people they work with and steal it, basically. Like, oh, that was a great idea. I'm gonna try that on my mix,
I think that's what we all do. I think that I think one of the problems that a lot of youngsters they're trying to find a quick fix to, like, they'll ask you a question and they're looking for the one-stop shop where it's all done. And as I said to him, I said, look, I can show you a bunch of shit, but chances are over time you'll find, like, for example, anyone that's intern here, I just lay it on the table, Steve. I just said, this is exactly what I do from start to finish. And I hold nothing back. And invariably what I find happens is that they sort of start developing their own style. I think kids these days are looking for, they need to learn to trust in their own instinct and their own way, and not be afraid to experiment and go out. It's all good to be shown a certain thing from start to finish, but then how about maybe you guys be brave enough to expand your repertoire and maybe come and show me something new, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, there are kids definitely are doing that. I think it's also just a different world. Like when I first came into recording and into the recording studio, there were recording studios. There were these huge, facilities that I was a part of. And it's those have gone smaller and smaller, and more music's being done in people's houses or in smaller rooms like my room that I have here. so, people don't have the access, or the kids don't have the access like they used to, like I did, to all these great, to see, like, in any given year, I'd probably see 30 to 40 amazing engineers come through Larrabee, with amazing producers and amazing artists. And, I got all that, knowledge that was thrown at me. Now, you're lucky if you're able to find one or two engineers that will take you under their wing and mentor you, and so it's a different world of access. I think we have more access where we do something like this, when we have like a virtual conversation, but a little less access maybe in, because you can't, a lot of these producers or people who are doing stuff, pretty sure Billie Eilish is not going to, and her brother aren't going to invite you into their bedroom,
sure,
to do an album, and it's, whereas, before I got to see artists like Billie Eilish make their songs,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I was uniquely privileged in that sense.
Definitely was a different time. The flip side to that for me is, I think kids today who are aspiring to get into the market, into the industry, living probably in the greatest time to be alive, in the sense that, well, as context, Steve, as a kid, when I first wanted to get in touch with an engineer, and Bob Clearmountain was my hero growing up, because he pretty much mixed, all the records that I was listening to and I was getting into at the time. He was just such a dominant force. And so when I decided I wanted to learn, I said, and this is with no disrespect to people in Melbourne, great studios and great engineers who are world class, but I just wanted to go to the source where the stuff that everyone else, where the benchmark was being set.
Yeah.
And in order for me to get in touch with, in 1978, 79, it was a letter, that took, lucky if it took 5 days to get there. And if they were lucky enough to, open on the day and respond on the day and return on the day, and then 5 days, that was a 2-week turnaround. Whereas now with this guy,
yeah, it's right.
We have access, and most people, I think, who you run your own social media account. You don't have a gatekeeper there or manager. Right. So even though there isn't that formal mentorship of I'll take you under my wing in a physical sense, there's still opportunity to be able to reach out to people and again, just little tidbits of information, a little here and there, and take those things on board, and then you've got this pastiche of a style, if you will, that you can experiment and try, and there's these wonderful groups on the internet, there are forums, you can find great peers, and
Absolutely. There is a lot, and that is the great thing. Like, I mean, and as you said, a lot of this is a double-edged sword, though, because then, one of the reasons that group that we're in with the Produce, Mix, and Conquers, or
Mix, Produce, and Conquer, I think, yeah.
Maybe it's not the greatest name because I can't remember it, but it's a great group. Whereas I like the positive reinforcement that happens in the group, the kind of, everybody's trying to help each other. Whereas I've seen in other groups, it kind of degrade down into like, well, I know the right way to do it and you're doing it wrong. And, I saw one guy do it on this group, and I called him out, and they immediately, credit to the administrators in the group, they squashed that guy, and he wasn't willing to, back down on his absolutism. And, they took him out. And then the other thing I really appreciated with that group is that I made a call because they welcomed me into the group, and they tagged everybody that was also a new member of the group. And as I was looking down the list of names, I realized it was all men. It was all males. And I was like, where are the women? I was like, there's got to be women who are interested in doing this. And I know there is, because I've worked with them. I know them. And I'm like, so they were open to doing, that group was open to really like reaching out to women and say, yes, we want you in the group. Please, let's hear your voices. And so I appreciated that group for their inclusion. I think that's it. It's so, as I was saying earlier, the problem with these this the new way of learning is, it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. If you're in the wrong group, it could be a poisonous group of people who are absolutists who think it's, there's only one way of doing it. And if you're not listening to a certain pair of speakers in a room that's a certain size with a certain dimension and a blah blah blah, and it's like it goes on and on with these these guys who are just so overly technical about things that they start losing the art of what we're doing and the beauty of what we're trying to express.
Absolutely. And I think in the context of supporting people, we got to remember that there was I've been doing this for shit, man. I've been in music since 1979, 1980 and in some capacity. And, I've had my own business of mastering since 1991 in my own shop. And we got to remember there was a time that we were starting out like they were and what it was like as someone who was aspiring and nervous and being daunted by the prospect. And, hence the reason I'm inspired to do what I do, man, because I was, you were very fortunate you got to be in these studios and I never had the classic internship, but I went to America with no money in my pocket and just banged on doors and everyone was very generous with their time. And, I never had any lengthy extended periods, but enough to get to learn a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. But it was never lost on me that people who didn't know me at all still gave me the time of day, and it was never lost on me. And I always remembered as a youngster, I made a promise to myself that if I ever got to a situation where I would have my own room or, establish myself somehow, I would never throw a kid under the bus, even if it was just a matter of, I'll talk to you for an hour. Let's have a talk about where you're at, where you want to go. Let's see how we can give you something to walk away with. Because it's the pivotal moments in our life that set us on a different trajectory, even if it's just 1 degree. And I'm a strong believer in that, mate. And that's why I think it's very important to, again, I can't drop everything all the time and be a doormat, but where I have the disposable time and energy to invest that and offer that to a kid. And getting just on your point on females, I think it's great that you called that out. I think it's wonderful that they did that unheard thing that we did online. I saw this thing online on YouTube, which was called, I think from memory, Why Aren't There Enough Female Producers in the Music Industry, or something along those lines, something fairly recent that was. And according to their research, if you believe it, and I have any reason not to, for every one female producer, and we'll define female producer as a female who is working in the gig full-time, making a living without any other supplementary income, okay? Mm-hmm. It's the entire world. There are 98 blokes around. And I find that now I'm not one for quotas and 50-50 exactness as such, but that to me is such a severe, disproportionate amount of what we should be having. And creativity is not gender-based. It's no one can tell me, no one can, I'm sorry, but there's no one that can be able to listen to a record and tell me that was done by a male and that was done by a female. I'm sorry, but you just can't. I call bullshit every single time if you're unaware of who was involved in making that record. And so I'm a great believer that and I really like your approach where you talked about the idea of us being allies. And I really love that concept, that the best thing that we can do as men is be allies, and not just be allies and tell them, hey, ladies, we want you here. We need you here. We support you. There's room for you, and we will do all we can to support you in your endeavors. But I think one of the things I'm really enjoying doing now is mentoring young female engineers, because I think personally for myself, the best way I can help is how can I help these female engineers to help themselves, to empower themselves so that then they can become a voice for other young women to be seen as inspiration for them. Because you and I can sit and talk all day and talk a good game about it. But if we really want to inspire young women, it's nothing like a female engineer up there kicking ass, doing the thing that will speak louder to a young aspiring girl. That's my view on it.
Well, yeah, I think anything is, representation, being able to see yourself in that position is important in this world, whether it's, you're a person of color, a Black person, or a female. There's so many areas that are representation. I was just talking to my neighbor, who happens to be my best friend, Amani, He's a black man that lives right next door to me. He's just recently gotten into music supervision, and he got a job, as a music supervisor on a couple great shows. And just today, another person shared that he shared this image, but all these black shows with white music supervisors on them, and I was like, wow, this is black entertainment, like entertainment made by black people for black people, yet somehow all the music supervisors are white people, and so like it, not having that voice, like someone like Amani, who his music knowledge is like he's a DJ, an engineer, a producer, and his music knowledge is so vast and so deep that he's going to kill it as a music supervisor. But nobody's seen someone like him, in a while, it seems like, at least according to the little research I've done, in that position. And it's ridiculous. It's like, well, why isn't there more black music supervisors? Yeah. There should be. And especially you would think for shows that are made by black people for black people, and and for the general public, but
but that's the intention. That's the
intention. You watch something like Lovecraft or Watchmen, and you realize that it was a white woman that was making all the music decisions on that show, and it kind of blows my mind. I was like, oh, all right, well, it seems like we could have found some diversity in that position. Woman, that's good, as diversity, but I think including voices is what in totality in the world we need to do. But in the little world that I can control, and you control yours, I'm going to do my best to make sure I'm as inclusive as possible with people. And I think the little forum that we had on the Unheard thing, I think that went well, and it was great to start that dialogue.
Absolutely. I think there was some great conversations there, and it was great to give the ladies a voice on the day, and obviously celebrating International Women's Day, but also celebrating women in the industry, and letting it be known that we encourage them. And if there's any women who are watching or listening to this podcast or with aspirations, there are some great, amazing female. I mean, there's some great women doing some great work out there. Mandy Parnell, for example, in the UK, who I'll have on the podcast.
I love Mandy. She's
amazing.
Yeah, she's a fantastic, and I think as all of us have to start dropping the clarification of things. She's not a woman engineer. She's just an engineer. She's an engineer.
It just happens to be a woman.
Mandy's and I saw someone the other day post on I think it was Instagram, but it was a meme that said, I'm going to start renaming. Oh, he's a male fireman. He's a male, whatever the job is. He's a male clerk. He's a male optometrist, or whatever. And it's instead of just to see how ridiculous that sounds. And all of a sudden we never put the qualifier before any other position for men.
Yeah.
So why would we for women?
Yeah. No, I hear you. And another great lady comes to mind is Piper Payne, who I just adore her. She does so much work for women in the audio industry, and a great role model. So she's an amazing engineer. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look, you don't get to. You don't get to learn under the auspices of Bob Katz by being a slouch. That's for sure. He's one of the hardest markers you'll ever come across. and rightly so. I mean, Bob's anyone that can work under someone like Bob. You got to have something special about you, because Bob, as beautiful a man as he is. I mean, I spent 3 days with Bob. It was the toughest mastering boot camp you could ever go through.
Right.
And look, he was very gracious. I just came to visit, and he didn't know me at all. Again, one of these other guys who I thought he was just impressed by the fact I was crazy enough to go over there, And
Right.
I wanted to learn so much that he took me into his lovely home for 3 days and just put me through the absolute ringer. And it was one of the best experiences, and I learned so much through him at the time. So I've always been grateful to Bob. So tell us about your room. How did you get into your current digs, and what inspired all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened was I got this room, quite a while ago now. It's been over 15, maybe 20 years, somewhere in there. But it was getting to the point in time where the big boardrooms, I was doing mixes on SSLs, and I still love SSL stuff, but it was the speed that we couldn't do on, because I was working with artists like 50 Cent or somebody like that, where you want to go from one song to another song quickly and back and forth. And so I for a few weeks, what I was doing was I was doing mixes both in the box and separated out on the board. And then I would have someone like 50 come in and then ask him, all right, which mix do you like better? And then when he couldn't tell the difference between the two, I was like, all right, it's probably time for me to start mixing in the box and get my own room. That way, because at that point, budgets were dwindling down. They weren't, they were asking you to do a lot more for a lot less. And so, excuse me, to have a place where I just have kind of a comfortable home base and I can get everything done in a way. And I saw the future coming. It was going to be just files sent to me, don't really see people. And then eventually, since I had the space, one of the mastering engineers I was using as a mixer, he retired, and I was kind of like not finding the guy I really liked. And I talked to one of my business partners, my current business partner, Mauricio Irigori, who was Dr. Dre's engineer for a long time. I said, what if we just started up a mastering thing? And we kind of looked at it as like, I could master your stuff, you can master mine, and then just have another set of ears on the mastering end. And then it kind of blossomed into more of like, we'll do other people's stuff. And that's what we started doing, and so we collected a room full of gear that was, and now, so I mix in the box, but I do mastering out of the box, back into the box. So if that makes sense, I have a playback computer and a capture computer. Mm-hmm. And between the two, there's an analog chain. And I enjoy that because I enjoy doing the clicky fix stuff in the digital world. You got clicks or snaps or click, blah, blah, take all that stuff out. And then I can do a nice color world with the analog gear, and add the analog flavor that I want to add without, reinventing the wheel on the client. And so that's basically the flow that I have here at this studio. So I mix in the box, but when it comes to mastering, I send it back out and put it through some analog pieces and then recapture it.
Yeah, I like your approach too. It's very similar. I don't have a pitching and a catching computer, but like you said, I think any corrective stuff, for example, I guess you probably would agree with me, but I think low end or too much low end seems to be the biggest issue that comes in for me. People just not, again, listing on their fields and smaller rooms. That probably sounds great in their room, but because they want to hear it, the tendency is to overcompensate. And so I find that like one band of multi-band just to tuck in that 40, 50 hertz range just to neaten it up. De-Essing, again, is another thing I like to. I'm not a big fan of notching too much because I find that if there's a global consequence in mastering. So if we dig in too much into one frequency, whether we're boosting or cutting, then we're going to start affecting the fundamentals and the the overtones from there.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I mean, you're lucky that you're a mix engineer. I can't even mix a drink. But I do know when I hear a mix what I can work with. So the way I define good is, can I work with this to the point where I can deliver some value? And if No, I can't. And it's usually a pretty clear line. Then I like to have a dialogue with the engineer or the producer to bring some constructive input. Now, you as a mix engineer, you finding yourself in that situation more these days, or do you tend to be a bit more forgiving and just rely on trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat, or like how do you approach it?
I do try to put on a completely different hat when I'm mastering. Because it's too easy for me as a mixer to go in like, oh, I would have done this as a mixed decision, or I would have done this as a mixed decision, where I have to kind of ignore that. And I listen to it more as a mastering / consumer. And I think of, all right, this is what it is. And this is the vision that the artist and the mixer and the producer came to. So, okay, what is it? And what do they love about it? And then I realized what it is. And I'm like, oh, I do love that about it also. And then I just try to accent what they love about it and give that back to them in a kind of a bigger in a bigger way, than what they gave it to me. And it's really not all actually too far what I do from because when I do mixing, I will listen to what the the artist or the producer has been listening to as a rough mix, just to understand kind of what they do love also about the song. And because you gotta people gotta know that when it comes to the mixer and the master, even the mastering, even more so, we've heard the song the least, and we're the least attached to it. Right? Correct. Everybody else is attached to it. They love it. They love everything about it. They've dissected it in a million different ways, and that's something they've lived with probably for months even before it got to me. So I got to be very conscious of that, and then very okay, so what is it that they love about this, and why is it they love about this, and then I try to bring out that love. Yeah. And hopefully I return something that sounds I put as much care into their music as they put into their time into their music.
Yeah, man. Two great quotes I remember from one guy called Tim Gillis, who runs Blue Mean, or not anymore. He lives in Tasmania now, but Tim Gillis at the old Quad Studios, now Blue Meanie in New Jersey, said to me, and I really liked his turn of phrase where he said, "Respect the mix author." It's very elegant, but I really like that turn of phrase. And of course that's only, I think you can really respect it and respect the vision and intention when the mix is in relatively good shape. And Bob Ludwig once said to me, the greatest compliment that any engineer or producer or artist could give me on a mastering job is after they've heard it on the system of obviously that they know and are intimate with, to get back and say, this sounds like the way I remember it when it left, but now you just somehow made it better.
Yeah. And that's the kind of the key, right? Is it's just, we're not supposed to reinvent the wheel on them. We're just supposed to give them incremental better. And I think also in this day and age, mastering's kind of taken on a new kind of overall thing. I think mastering's in this day and age is best suited for album formats, or even if you're just uploading to digitally, you still want things to flow. Mm-hmm. And you still want things to match from song to song to song, right?
Correct.
Where I don't really think that is tremendously as important to master things on a single level. Like if you're just doing singles. Now, if you're going to compile those singles, I would say go get them remastered, and into an album, and having it as a one piece of work, get that mastered. But mix engineers these days can make their stuff so loud and so ready for whatever format they needed to put it on with the tools that they have, is that, what they don't have is the ability to go over 12 songs and make sure that they're all kind of matching exactly and blending and
fitting together, making everything makes sense. Yeah
exactly. So that's why I really feel that mastering really shines right now, is in that area. I think that's where mastering is just an absolute. Whereas I don't think it's wrong to get your single mastered, but at the same time, sometimes I'll get these tracks in and they're already at -8 loose or whatever, and I'm like, I'm not going to make this louder, I could clear it up a little bit if you want me to, or not, it's kind of, to taste. But for the most part, it's there, what you need to get done. So
I remember you told in a previous conversation we had, I remember you said that if it comes in that loud. I tend to, because I know that quite often people now mix records and they want to hear how it sounds in their car, and they give it a kind of either a quasi mastering, or, you know, they're just used to listening to certain things at a certain level. And so they just want to see how it kind of behaves. And most of the time it's just inadvertent, not letting, you know, not bypassing a limiter or whatever they're putting on the mix bus. And it's interesting because you said to me that you don't normally buy. You said, hey, if this is what it is, you'll just bring down the, you know, you said you'll just bring it down.
Yeah, just bring it the level.
And
yeah,
Chris,
it's all digital.
yeah. And Chris Athens, I think, is the same. And I've tended to ask engineers to, you know, give me one of each. So at least now I've got a sense of what you like, and one without, and then I'm going to try and match it, or, you know, nuance it a bit better, like you said, to taste and to style and to just, you know, to finesse it, to get it within that ballpark. But yeah, I think I don't have a crystal ball, but I can't help but feel that mixing and mastering will probably meld together at some stage in the future. I really do. I think that we will still have dedicated specialist guys, and I still think there's something to be said about someone to be, as you alluded to before, that, you know, no matter how good your ears are, once you hear something so many times, you get acclimatized to it, and it's the only reason you really would want to engage a mastering guys, for someone to come in as an objective, fresh set of ears who can share the vision of what they have. Because let's face it, you know, like you said, we're trying to perceive what it's like for, you know, for Johnny Punch Clock. What's it going to be like? What's the emotion, the feeling that's going to hit them when they hit play? And you can only listen to a song for the first time once. And so, you know, if we can be good and quick at what we do to capture that excitement, that emotion, that feeling, that gets lost over time, that I think will never be replaced. But you know, anyway, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I'll probably 15, 20 years from now, I probably will be out of the mastering game. I'll be 80 years of age by that time, and hopefully I'll still be around and, you know, telling kids to get off my lawn and, you know, giving. If it's not too rude a question to ask you, how old are you now, Steve? If it's okay.
I'll be 49 this year.
Oh, damn. Okay, you're right. You're still sprightly.
Yeah.
You got at least 20.
I've got a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old, so I don't feel spry at all. They like to remind me of that.
So it's funny, isn't it, when you do a certain job of a certain profile, and people think that your kids would be like my kids. My kids aren't involved in music. Okay, my daughter is 23. She's into video and she's artistic and creative, but she's not engineered. Nothing like this. My son, who's 27, is into training, high-end German Shepherds for, you know, drug detection, bomb detection, and, you know, high degree German Shepherds for super duper work. Okay, you know, and people think, oh, geez, if I was your kid, I'd be dying to get in. I said, but no, that you're not my kid, and our kids to us is just you're just dad. You know what I mean?
If there's any credit to us, I think we raised good kids that went off and did the things that they wanted to do.
Exactly.
That's all you want to do, right? They just want to see your, you know, like both my kids are really into math. You know, I've got one kid that my oldest is graduated with a physics degree. The other one's in, you know, at UC Santa Barbara, studying to be a mathematician. Beautiful. So, you know, it's, you know, and that's their thing that they love. That's great. You know, I loved music, and I figured out a way to make that happen, you know, and my wife loved nonprofit work, and she found a way to make that work. So it's, you know, I think it's good that our kids are off doing the things that they like.
Oh, most definitely.
And not maybe doing what we do. Yeah.
It's vital. I see it with a lot of kids myself who want to become engineers, and like myself had, I don't know about you growing up, Steve, but, you know, my parents, bless them, they did the best they did with what they had. My dad's approach, being old school, was it was all about academia. And funny, we talked about lawyers before, that I was groomed to be an international lawyer, and I had absolutely no interest in it. And I left home, you know, because I had an overbearing father, which now I'm grateful for, because it was him that drove me to have that real kind of fuck you attitude, and I'll show you, and I'm gonna, you know, and I'm gonna achieve what I want to achieve. But I did you have supportive parents as you were sort of entering into the industry and trying to pursue your career?
I think they were fairly supportive. They were maybe a tad bit confused as to what I was going to go do and didn't really understand what it was. Yeah. I found the program. I was actually a business major in Sacramento, and then I found this school that was doing recording arts up in Northern California called Chico, California State University at Chico. So I went there into their music program. And I don't think at the time my parents really understood what I was going after and what I was, doing. But as a kid, my dad had reel-to-reel machines at the house. He had when the Fostex cassette multi-track came out, he got one of those with a microphone. So I would take, that thing up in my room, and I would make my walk-in closet a
vocal booth,
ISO booth. Yeah. And record and so I had this great, just kind of and then I was very into computers. I had every computer there ever was, from, the TRS-80 through the Commodore 64 to the Amiga to the Atari 1024, every different computer, and every one of them I figured out a way to make music on. It was already just kind of a good foundation that I had as a kid. I spent a lot of time in my room with my stereo equipment.
So you take a very technical. So would you say you're more of a technician? You take a more technical approach to your mixing and
I'm
mastering?
a little bit of a combination. I like to call myself a good bridge, because I was a classical musician and a jazz musician. And
what was your instrument? What was your
I
instrument?
was a trumpet player.
Yep.
And so I was, I can speak music and understand music very well.
Your legatos from your staccatos. Yep.
Exactly. So I remember I was accidentally in on a recording session for a Canadian. She was kind of like a Celine Dion type. And we're at Capitol Records, and the arranger wasn't there, but who was doing this, who was for the string section. And then they kept on playing this one passage over and over. And I was just like, and it sounded wrong every time. And I started looking through the thing, and I found that, the second violins have a C sharp written where it should be a C. So just take that out and you'll be fine. And then every engineer in the room just looked at me like, because I was the assistant kid, I just thumbed through the
score?
The score real quick, and I'm like, oh, here's the problem.
Awesome.
This is the problem you're running into. And then everybody kind of looked at me like, who is this kid? What is he talking about? Because string players and session players will, no matter what's on the page, they're going to play it.
Yeah.
If it's written there, they'll play it.
Exactly. It's like reading a script, and you
don't screw with it. And so until you tell them, like, oh yeah, no, that was a mistake. Someone made that was wrong. So,
yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Well, listen, buddy, I can sit and talk to you. I know I say this. It's almost a cliche now. Every time I do a podcast, I always come to the point where I say, I could sit and talk to you for fucking hours, and you're no different. But I'm just aware of the time that we spent, and I'm grateful for the time you've given up today, Steve. But just before we wind things up, any pearls of wisdom for anyone young, aspiring, wants to get their foot in the door? Just something practical just one practical thing that you can offer them up that they can walk away with.
I think we mentioned a couple of those today. And I think if there's anything to take away from it is that, put yourself in the position to win by finding out where people are making music and the music that you want to create, and find that community, because it's out there and you can find them. And then secondly, don't be afraid to ask people like you or me or whoever it is for help. Someone just reached out to me the other day through Instagram and said, hey, I'd love to be your intern. Unfortunately, it was COVID time, so I wasn't able to accept them as an intern right now. But I said, yeah, anything you want me to do virtually, though, I'll be more than happy, to help you out. So, reach out to people and then put yourself in a position to win. Put yourself where the music is and the music's happening. Can't make everything happen from your bedroom.
Yeah, that's true. And not to be afraid to hit people up. Remember, they are people. And one great lesson, even for me, was when I was just telling Steve before the podcast we started, when I hit Mike Fraser to do a podcast, and Mike's just a Goliath in the industry, and I didn't see much of him online. When I asked him, "Why'd you say yes?" He said, "Because you asked." It was as simple as that. And I think you'll find that most people who you put up there, who are at the upper echelon, for the overwhelming majority of them, are really nice, really approachable. So long as you approach them respectfully and courteously, and you're honest about where you're at and what your intention is, I think you'll find most people these days are very receptive.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm an optimist. I believe in people, and more times than not, people affirm my beliefs that there are actually more good people out there than there are bad. And so I think people want to help you,
I agree.
Just give them the opportunity.
You do. Good words of advice. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for your time today. And before I check out, I must say thank you to my sponsor, Omega MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in 6 Down Street in Collingwood. George Soteropoulos, UFC legend, who is coaching us down there. And if you don't have to be, if you want to train as an elite fighter, they can cater for you. But for most of us guys who look, I'm nearly 58. It's never too late to start. If you want to start, just head down there just for fitness and discipline, and to hang around a bunch of really cool heads and get yourself fit and get your head clear. And, just do something good for yourself, your body, mind, and spirit. I can highly recommend Omega Jiu-Jitsu and MMA in Collingwood. And thanks to George for looking after me, as he always does, as well as a wonderful crew down there. All right, then I'm out of here. Thanks again, Steve. Appreciate you and your time. And we'll get you on the podcast again another time. It was really fascinating today, getting some insights from you and your journey. And, I certainly learned a few things today. So I appreciate that. And also, goodbye to everyone. And as I close off, as per usual, I'll say, please, everyone, be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you, crazy kids. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next round.